കണ്ടാണ് ഈ തളവാക്കുളത്തിന്റെ കാര്യമൊക്കെ വന്നപ്പോൾ റീസെന്റ് ആയിട്ട് there's been a discussion on Vaitam Satyagraha in Malabar Journal done by Sulbeyadam, which still trying to Gandhify the entire movement, which have different courses, and in that Sulbeyadam still says that the case of Talava is kind of contradictory. First of all, he is a nationalist, or his movement is nationalist. On the other hand, he is also the one who did the major event of Talava of killing the oppressed people. So, Ilayadam still see this as a contradiction, but I don't see this as a contradiction. It's still in our popular imagination that being a nationalist is something. Then it's something contrary to being a perpetrator, or being a reason for this event of Talavapuram. Still, Vaitam Satyagraha is still under the idea of Gandhifying the movement, and still Gandhifying the entire movement.
So I don't know if I followed you correctly, but I think there is something in response to what Sunil said, said, right? Should we ask him?
No, I'm not asking questions.
No. I'm just joking. We should have some lighter moments as well. So the idea is, I think nationalism is a very different kind of stuff now, because I am very suspicious of nationalism, and I am very happy that I have grown out of that. I am no longer a nationalist. I hate that word. As a researcher in history, okay, I read and I can also teach, because I have been teaching nationalism for a long time. But I think because of the current political situation, where in most parts of the world we know that nationalism has made the lives of people really difficult. So therefore, do we have anything left in it? I don't know. But there was a time when anti-colonial nationalism, people thought it is liberatory. I do agree with that. It was liberatory at some point of time, but now, it is just the other way around. And about Vaitam Satyagraha and other kinds of things, I think we need to really look at the different layers of experiences of people who participated in the Satyagraha. And I guess people had different sort of ideas about it. I happened to read some of the materials of that time, particularly newspaper articles of the 1923-24 that time, run up to that, and also during that moment. Which were the communities really mobilized by this? We know that there were people from Puraya community and all that, but did it really mobilize the, let's say, a substantial part of this Purayas or Parayas? But my guess is that it did not. There were some, but not the whole movement of Purayas at that time, when Ayangali himself was alive. Now I thought, historian Charai Ramdas, who actually did a lot of research in this area, he also was is of the opinion that it did not really mobilize. But then those who were mobilized by this, like a nationalist like George Joseph, and he was completely disappointed because of the response of Mahatma Gandhi himself. So therefore I think we really need to look at the different layers of this particular mobilization. And when you read the Epic of Tarangul, that book by Mahadev Desai, which is actually, a kind of, what I can say, a diary entry of the travel of Mahatma Gandhi to this part of Kerala. So it has recorded all the events of that time, of the Gandhi's travel. It tells us about how people were enthusiastic. But then there is this very whole paternalistic kind of idea of the Gandhian movement. So therefore I think what we really need is to think about the different layers of experience of this particular movement. And I always thought that there is something quite interesting in what Bhikkhu Perez wrote in his Reformed Tradition, that book, at the end of which he has reproduced the kind of conversation between that Nambiadiri and Mahatma Gandhi. So you will read that. And then his concluding part, he says, it was just to accommodate the rising, mobilization of Dalits. So Pulayas were mobilized already by that time. But actually, if you want to really look at the mobilization of Pulayas, it doesn't begin with Iyengar actually. That is absolutely wrong. Pulayas have been mobilized actually by these European missionaries, not by others. I mean, the rest happens. I'm not saying that Iyengar did not do. As a researcher in history, I would say that we really need to look at different layers of experience. From 1850s onwards, people have been mobilized, and by maybe around 1870, you have school teachers from among the Pulayas, but they were not allowed to walk on the road, and they had to, walk through, not even through bylanes. They had to walk through woods, jungles, and so on. So, but if you go to many villages of the of Kottayam, Pathanamthitta, and all that, if you do fieldwork, you will soon realize that many of those villages have been the hideouts of the Pulayas who escaped to wilderness from the upper caste oppression. In such places, you have missionaries teaching, and teachers from the Pulayas who could teach Malayalam and basic arithmetic and all that. So those things have happened. And so therefore, we need to come out of even some of these histories from the Dalit side, which actually do not really see this sort of facts as very important. So what I want to suggest is that, Vaikam Satyagraha had its significance in terms of mobilizing, but then so we need to look at, we should have a lot of caveats when you make this argument, in the sense that, there was nationalist elite mobilization, and this happened more in all the temple energy movement. It was a demand of, and then I forgot this, there was this, Usirula Nayar Mani Adikum, I forgot. It's not coming back to me. So, which has been reproduced in all the books. So, Nayar Mani Adikam Katnamuratil poet. So, let us think about the complexity of this. Is the point I want to say. Now, for many of our friends, I don't think that they really, in spite of them being well-meaning and very good academics and so on, they seem to forget this particular thing. And now the last point, and see, if you read the Ravakula, you will soon realize that what is the point in calling Vedathambi as nationalist? He's the one who was killing all these people, right? And interesting guy. So a few years ago, that time when M.A. Baby was a Minister of Culture and Education, the government of Kerala brought this goddamn sword of Vedathambi to Trivandrum, and unfortunately, television showed how Subhadra Kumari and ONV could well-revered poets have no problem with them. Let them rest in peace. Doing this, this is stupidity of the heart at its height. Because the sword of a ruler, whether it was a Dalava or a king, is the sword of the oppressor. That is good. It has just got historical value as an oppressor's gadget. That's all. I have seen many things like this. When I go to Museum of Slavery, I see that I don't see anybody coming and doing this sort of thing. It's an object of that kind. So therefore, one has to be very suspicious about this kinds of things. We will have a private conversation. For want of time, I am saying. Sorry.
Dear all, thank you very much. It was a really inspiring discussion, the questions and the lecture. I'm an outsider here, but I've been for years following passionately historians' works from Kerala. And a few interesting ideas appeared here in the slides by Professor Sanalmohan. And I was wondering, why only from Bengal? Why Kerala historians should probably arrive at the moment that they have so much to say? I mean, in the terms of so rich material for narrating, constructing, producing histories of different kinds that come from this seemingly little region that is now called Kerala. And not only that, there are concepts that come from here. I mean, people somehow purchased and bought what these great historians of Bengal did, of course, from Bengal, and that somehow became in the perception of the world the Indian history or the moment. But I'm asking myself, there's so much more interesting here going on. I know personally a few promising historians like my colleague Abhiraj Malayil, who are doing wonderful things that I believe one day may change not only the factual history, but the conceptual history by introducing new ways of thinking of history in terms of new genres of narration, like, I don't know, like songs, like stories. Like, there are so many things here in Kerala that people outside of that have even are no aware of. That it can be so rich, yes? It can be so influential and inspiring intellectually to move the historical thinking forward. And of course, the thing like Dalit Bandhus did is some inspiration to that. And I'm asking myself, why only with these categories like Dalit and Bandhu? Why not introduce something Malayalam language to that? Yes, there are also concepts here. Yes, it should somehow open to the world outside and become and cross-fertilize things. Yes, with others. Yeah, that's all. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so what you said is correct. I'm familiar with many of these things that historians based in here do, as well as Malayali origin historians elsewhere are engaged in this sort of work. Now, in conceptual history, I think one of the books which comes to my mind, one recent one is the one edited by Dalit Bandhus and his colleagues, which is again about using these sort of conceptual categories drawn on this side of the world. I forgot the title of the book, but basically it's about Oceanus method and other kinds of debates that are taking place now. There we have quite a number of young people writing. Then I'm a little bit familiar with the ongoing research on international. I mean, basically. The Indian Ocean region, and so this is in the context of the group I interact with, group of scholars I interact with who work on Indian Ocean slavery. So they do a lot of interesting work. But the question that you have raised, or issue that you have pointed out, is that of using the analytical categories drawn on the cultural world of Malayalis, if I understood you correctly. So that is happening. For example, in this particular book I mentioned, we have Muhammad Kuriya writing about Marimakatayam and all that. So I also had occasion to listen to some young researchers who asked me a question. When all these scholars now write, aren't they writing about the propertied classes? Like my friend Yasir Arafat or many others, who write about the aspects of monsoon Islam, of which Kerala is a very major part. So the question raised to me was that they were writing more about those propertied classes among Muslims who were engaged in trade and commerce. Yes, they were doing that because these propertied classes had generated a great deal of source materials in Arabic and Arabic Malayalam and all that. I don't use these materials. Perhaps Abhilash would be doing that. But fortunately, I am aware of what Abhilash did. Abhilash's work I have gone through, and the works of many other young people who are writing today. So I have an idea of this. Well, in my talk, I did not bring in because this was not directly connected with the public history. In a way, there is a public history which is emerging. Thank you. So I will connect with that. Now, it was last year when we had this 100th year of a celebration of the Malabar rebellion, or it is continuing in a way even today. So there were a lot of special articles written about Kuriya wrote about different animals in the context of the Malabar struggles of 1921 and various other kinds. So those things were not so much discussed in historiography, like horses and other animals. Or you talk about bullock carts and various other kinds of modes of travel, animals involving in it, etc. So there is a certain kind of, I cannot call it as public history in this sense, maybe it does it round in producing certain kind of knowledge first, because this was a highly partisan kind of debate that was unleashed in Kerala. There were a few movies being made denigrating the prominent freedom fighters of that time. And also there was this extremely horrible ICHR historians who deleted the names of martyrs who were killed. And in fact, I happened to attend a meeting a few weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago in Malappuram district. In Malappuram actually. So it was about the release of a book on Malabar Rebellion, and also a public seminar quite well attended by a lot of women and men. And then one person who talked with me, he said, well, these people, I am very skeptical about his statement though. He told me that, well, these people are here because they were forced to come. I don't think they were really forced to come. Maybe there was some force because they were part of some self-help group and so on. Probably political parties who organized it said that, oh, you have to go and be there and so on. But still, they came and sat through the entire proceedings and left. I was also there. So there is, so through film, the medium of literature, through all this, public, through public events and publications and so on, we have a certain kind of public history being generated. So that happened. And in all this they use a lot of locally generated kind of ideas. And I found them as really significant. For example, what happens to the martyrs? Just after I came back, when I thought about what is happening in Gaza, for instance, thousands of children being killed. So these are shaheeds of a kind. There is a ritual commemoration. So there is, in Janaki Nayar's article, which I just mentioned, she talks about negative and positive commemoration in the context of history. I didn't go into that. Now we have we are actually witnessing a really difficult time in human history where so much of genocidal violence taking place. And what happens to these children being killed? What sort of histories could be written about? And this is a time when I read alongside this the testimonies of people who survivors of Shoah, the people who actually the testimonies of the survivors of the Jewish death camps, all this, including Auschwitz, people who have survived and their descendants. So I have that particular book. It is written by Jewish scholars. But then the question is to look for the common humanities, the universals that I talked about. And this is my last point in relation to this. So I had on two occasions I went to this great genocidal museum in Berlin, and also a European Jewish museum. So we had an argument with a young historian from India. So he asked me, when you go there, you are not a Jewish guy. I said, I am not. I don't look either. I look very different person. But then he asked me this question: how do you connect with these people? I was asked this question long back when I worked in Max Planck Institute, where we had another kind of debate in the context of international migrants, in a way, forced migration taking place. So the point I said to them is that, so I grew up in a Kerala, but I forgot these famous lines of envy. എവിടെ ചാട്ടവാറ് വീഴുവോ എൻ്റെ പുറത്താവുന്നു. So wherever human beings get beaten up, that whiplashes falls on my back too. So this is the kind of society in which I grew. That's the kind of political values that we have imbibed. So therefore, when I walk into this Jewish museum or when I go to this Holocaust museum, so I have this feeling. And then when I listen to this, the prayers that the Shaheeds in Malayalatile Shuhadakal nu parayunnavaruണ്ട്, Malabar area. So we have this tremendous kind of feeling of a certain kind of history where human sufferings inform us. The same thing, we know that there is a huge connection between the American slavery and the kind of technology perfected in killing the Jews. So there is, I remember reading this, how this particular experience of human oppression have traveled from the American South to that of Europe. So there is a back and forth movement of technologies of violence. This I have read also when I read Black Jacobins of C.L.R. James talking about the Caribbean. So the whole idea is, as a researcher in history, I look at these universals, possible universals, maybe of an earlier period, but then today when we talk about history, these universals are important. Now, as you said, well, there are these concepts of, Shuhadakal or martyrs from here, coming up here. And I forgot this the Arabic title of the book, which is, I think, just before Tufatul Mujahideen, a poem written in the Malabar context, talking about the need for jihad. But this jihad is basically a kind of resistance to the Portuguese in the context of the trade rivalry in the Malabar region. Now this is translated, and there's a very beautiful introduction to that book written by M.N. Pearson, historian. Where actually they work with this locally evolved kind of concepts and categories. But then it happens in the Arabic cosmopolitanism. This is a kind of term which people use today to talk about this Indonesian trade and the kind of world it had created. So I don't specialize in this particular area of history, but my interest was largely coming out of the Indonesian slave trade. But I know that these materials do come in different kind of languages, and Arabic being very prominent in that, and of course other Portuguese and Dutch languages are also there. So the colleagues I interact with in this network have told me that many of these are translated into English, so source materials. So we need to look at the locally derived concepts. So now people, particularly scholars like Dalit Bandhus and others, they do talk about this, locally evolved concepts and categories. And I found that, this criticism is already there. The question that young researchers raised to me, they are quite well relevant. Such questions will be there. But then this issue remains there. The locally derived concepts and categories. The Bengal case is that I think historiographically they had really gone much ahead of the Malayali scholarship. Because my feeling is that this, unfortunately or fortunately, Malayali scholars hardly did any, except the current generation of people doing this. I'm not saying that people have, I still remember listening to one talk by Barunde long back, in Calicut University, where he recalled his interactions with T.I. Punnan. T.I. Punnan was a very important historian. Teaching in the Adway UC College, and he is known for his research in the area of Dutch history in Kerala. So he was referring to that. So there was a generation who did that kind of things. In fact, if we look at Ashin Das Gupta's writing on Malabar in Asian Trade, I read that book. So they have used this sort of, works of Malayali scholars. But I don't know what happened to a subsequent generation. There was not so much of an intellectual exchange. And therefore, I think people kept on talking about this Renaissance as if nothing has happened in historiography. This is my thought, because I heard this from the sort of historians themselves. I did interact with them a little bit on a different context. And I am aware of the kind of debates that have taken place. And I don't think the Malayali scholars of the 70s, 80s, they ever did any of this. Those who wrote on Srinarayana movement, etc., they did this as if things were happening in a vacuum. So that's it.
Most of Dalit Bandhus' books have been published by himself. On the one hand, it was basically a statement on his part in choosing to publish it by himself. But on the other hand, it's also a statement about whether his books... No, the Malayalam books too. That's true, yeah. But was it also a statement of whether his publications were acceptable to the mainstream publishers who were publishing history books? Now, why I'm asking this is because when Sanal, you spoke about the academic historic method or the academic historic domain, the historical method itself, as it is understood at certain points of time within academic history, and as it spills over into other kinds of semi-official discourses, is that very restrictive and exclusionary? in actually not probably permitting other kinds of views and other kinds of positions of history to be to flourish or even to be written. That's one question. And second thing is, when, as you said, and as we have seen, there's been a number of different streams of history that have come up much later, Dalit, feminist, or based on different kinds of sexualities or genders, etc. Whether that kind of internal dialogue between these different streams, like the work of Dalit Bandhus or other such works, I'm aware that there is a lot of stuff being written as if they are history and which do not actually qualify to be history. Some of it is which is myth, especially of the right-wing variety. But is there a kind of internal dialogue, dialectic of exchange within this wider domain of history itself, which can probably positively transform the historical discipline and make it much more plural?
This is a problem which actually was confronted by historians who actually talked about this sort of public history, and also the other alternatives that have been emerging. Now, in the case of, as you specifically referred to the Bandhus' writings, see, sometimes what would happen, in fact, if we read this particular book which I just referred to, Dalavakulam, so he doesn't in fact give sources the way the academic historians do, but he refers to that in the text, but there is no in-text reference. On a few occasions he does it, but it doesn't, he did that on a few occasions, but it's not a rule as far as his style is concerned. Now, methodology side, if we really look at, I think probably broadly in India, so there never took place a very serious kind of argument between historians and others who do this sort of things. But methodological questions remained as really significant. Like if you are using, say, social memory, for example, now people do that. So social memory has been thought of as a very important aspect of historical writing. And then there is this whole idea that when history writing has become a very prominent thing, now that in certain ways eroded the whole idea of memory. Now, this is an argument we find in the case of Pierre Nora when he talks about the problem of sites of memory in his very celebrated article. So when things get committed to writing, then actually we needn't think about a memory in such a big way. But still there can be margins and excesses which will remain there even as we have written history. And now I have just mentioned about Carlo Ginzburg, and usually in historiography, because this is something often people refer back to Hayden White and many others in the Western tradition who encountered this. And now a methodological question using this one for students of history, I think encountering this, one important essay is of Ranajit Guha, this Chandra's death, in the text where he actually talks about, gives a very fine story of this village girl from Bengal who had to undergo abortion, and then that was mainly to safeguard this sort of public acceptance of the man who was responsible for it, who was married to her own relative, her own sister, I guess, if I remember it correctly. So therefore there is a lot of gender, there is a lot of caste, there is a lot of violence, etc. involved in this particular text. So what is the methodology which could be used in writing this? So now Ranit Guha used this sort of methodology of historians, and also analyzed this text as a literary scholar would do. So this is the way it was done. Now, in the article which I referred to, that of Dipesh Chakrabarty, he quotes from the sort of debate among the historians and literary scholars in Australia, who were writing about the histories of stolen generation. These so-called half-caste children or black children who would be taken to the white homes to train and learn the white Australian ways of living and so on, getting completely alienated from such societies, their own parent societies. And now, looking back at the histories of the Aborigines and Torres Strait Islanders and writing their histories, the indigenous historians, raised this methodological question as very, very significant. If we want to say, whose truth is this? I don't know. This is a real problem. Whose truth are we talking about? And whose universals are we talking about? So this remains as an unresolved issue. But the question is that, the central question is to talk about the agency of the people who experienced all this alienation, oppression, and so on. I think this question will keep coming back. So therefore, methodology question remains. Now let us reflect on this in the context of Dalit Bandhus' writings. Now, as you said, he published himself. So for mainstream publishers, I think we don't know. Probably today there is a lot more history being published by mainstream publishers. And yes, they do look for market, they do look for certain kind of dressing up of the material as academic history, so that it gets sold and so on. I should think about whether they are so much committed to the methodologies of historians. Probably yes, they are committed to that. But there are different ways in which vernacular histories could be articulated. And this had happened in most Indian languages, I think. I understand it only through translations and my own interaction with researchers from other regions of India who worked on vernacular histories. They do talk about this sort of publications and so on. So then the most serious question is it just an archive? So when we have all this stuff here, catalogued and so on, is it something which awaits a historian in future to write about this, or do they capable of producing knowledge on their own account? This is a question. I think if that is the question, there is a certain kind of methodology involved in it. And then that invites the historian's attention to interact with the kind of knowledge which has been produced. So how does it travel back to the classroom, travel back to the practice of the researchers, etc.? Then, and I guess they can stand on their own merit, as historical intervention. And then obviously we do have this Rankian kind of thing. Even as we have that, they do survive. They definitely survive. Such writings will have their own meanings produced. So therefore I think this back and forth movement of historians with these materials should be possible, but not just as an archive, but as already a site where knowledge has been produced. This is how I think one way of addressing this question. Then the other one is the internal dialogue, which, as you said, is very important. So we have different genres of historiographies and so on. There is internal dialogue taking place. This is what you meant. Now, for example, I think if we take the last couple of decades of history writing in India, and I guess there was a very substantial kind of interaction of scholars working across disciplines doing a wonderful job. There are a lot of people doing this sort of work. So therefore I think that internal dialogue is taking place. Then there was another point which I missed from what you said about. No. If you okay, so I think this internal dialogue is really significant, and I also think about particularly certain areas of scholarship now. We do have a network of scholars from critical humanities and social sciences doing excellent work. Now the network of, for example, Dalit literatures at East Anglia University, I think, I forgot the university's name in the UK, who are organizing this sort of events. And there are a lot of such networks where we have people from different specialization interact. And there I think these literatures form a very important part of this social science inquiry as well. There are particularly referring to this network of scholars writing and publishing and so on. So that way, yes, I think in our context, perhaps this occasions a certain kind of reflection on all this practice. Yeah, that's how I mean, this is right. This is just a very provisional response to that.